Good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for finding time to be with us this afternoon. About 6 minutes past 3 p.m. here in Nairobi, East African time. The show is Diaspora Dispatches, and I get to bring you the latest news from across the continent of Africa. My name is Miriam Ogutu. Good morning, good evening, depending on where you're tuned in and watching us from. We start our bulletin this afternoon from South Africa, and South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has denied interfering with the country's judiciary over delays in the presentation of the final report of a corruption inquiry. The commission, headed by Justice Raymond Zondo, investigated allegations of widespread corruption in South Africa during President Jacob Zuma's 9 years in power, known as the state capture. It already handed over its first, second, third and fourth reports and was due to present the final part of its findings by last Wednesday. This has, however, been delayed several times amid allegations of interference. A statement by the presidency said Mr. Zondo had communicated last Thursday on the delay and undertook to finalize the report as soon as possible. The commission then said it would deliver it by Sunday evening. 3 former Nigerian football officials who were kidnapped by gunmen on Saturday night have been freed. A police spokesperson has confirmed without giving details. The kidnappers had demanded a ransom before setting the trio, including our former Secretary General of the country's Football Federation free. Ahmed Sani Toro spent 6 years in his role at what is now known as the Nigerian Football Federation between 1993 and 1999. He was kidnapped alongside former Nigerian under-23 assistant coach Gaba Ila and Issa Jah while driving from the capital Abuja to Bauchi. Having attended the wedding of former NFF President Aminu Maigari's son, it was not immediately clear whether the kidnappers were paid ransom. Before the release of the captives, Nigeria is facing a worsening spate of kidnappings for ransoms by armed gangs who frequently attack travelers and rural communities. Tunisian Coast Guard say they have retrieved the bodies of 4 migrants after their boat sank off the port city of Sfax. In recent months, dozens of migrants have drowned as increasing numbers have attempted to reach Europe in small boats from Tunisia and Libya. Many are fleeing conflict and poverty in Africa and the Middle East. And more than 130 civilians were killed by jihadists in 3 neighboring towns over the weekend. The government in Mali has confirmed. It blamed a group called Masina Katiba, which is affiliated to Al-Qaeda, for the attacks in Dialasagou and 2 other localities in central Mali's Mopti region in a separatist jihadist attack on Saturday near the city of Gao. Regional officials said at least 20 civilians were killed. The country has been battling a decade-long insurgency that has affected millions of people and has also engulfed other countries in the region. The head of a Nigerian village where criminals attacked 2 churches and kidnapped 36 people on Sunday says people have nothing left to sell to raise the ransom money demanded by the kidnappers. Elisha Mari, head of the Rubu village in the northwestern Kaduna state, was one of the abductees released on Monday. He was freed and was asked to mobilize the community to pay ransom for the abducted relatives, according to local media outlets. He told the BBC that the attackers did not give a timeline for the payment of the ransom. The police have neither confirmed nor denied the ransom demand. The Commissioner of Internal Security, Samuel Arwan, said 3 people were killed and 2 others sustained injuries during the attacks. Eyewitnesses told the BBC that one of the churches was ambushed by a convoy of more than 30 motorcycles. Each one had between 2 and 3 gunmen. The church was conducting its morning mass when gunmen opened fire and worshippers started running for safety. A similar attack was carried out in another church where Sunday school class was ongoing. And the Cameroonian football star Samuel Eto'o has admitted committing multi-million-dollar tax fraud while he was playing for the Spanish giants Barcelona. A court in the city gave him a 22-month jail term and a fine, but he will avoid going to prison because he pleaded guilty. In total, Eto'o will have to pay back more than $8 million. The court ruling said Eto'o and his agent had deliberately evaded tax on income from image rights between 2006 and 2009. During his playing days, Eto'o was considered one of the world's top strikers. He is now president of the Cameroonian Football Federation. And a Catholic bishop in South Sudan says the country is experiencing severe food insecurity because a few individuals in positions of authority control the abundant resources, deprive the majority and force them to go hungry. Alex Lodiong Sakor, the bishop of Yei, said many people are suffering because there is no sense of solidarity with the poor among those who should be caring for their needs. The Russian invasion of Ukraine has caused a global food crisis, but in addition, South Sudan has to grapple with unprecedented levels of food insecurity caused by the conflict, climate change, and the COVID-19 pandemic. A Chinese filmmaker wanted by the Malawian authorities as part of an investigation into allegations of racism and child exploitation has been arrested in neighboring Zambia. Lu K was a Malawi resident when he was exposed by the BBC African Eye investigation, which reported he had used Malawian children to film personalized greetings videos which sometimes included racist content. These videos can be bought for up to $70 on Chinese social media and internet platforms. Lu K denied that he had made the derogatory videos and said he made his videos in order to spread Chinese culture to the local community. Malawian police said last week they had launched an investigation but were unable to arrest the Chinese filmmaker as he could not be found. Department of Immigration and Citizenship Services spokesperson Pascali Zulu confirmed that Lu K was arrested in the town of Chipata, eastern of Zambia. And then he head over to Liberia, where the last batch of 268 Ivorian refugees in Liberia, some of whom had been in the country for more than 20 years, have been repatriated. The Ivorian refugees started streaming across the border into Liberia in 2010 when violence broke out following a hotly contested presidential election. Political violence and uncertainty since that election has sent more refugees across the border into Liberia. The weekend repatriation of the last batch of these refugees was overseen by Filippo Grandi, the head of the United Nations Refugee Agency, UNHCR. The evacuation means those opting to remain in Liberia will now be there as ordinary Ivorian citizens living in a foreign country, the UNHCR chief has said. Ukrainian's President Volodymyr Zelensky has told the African Union that the continent is the hostage of Russia's war in Ukraine. The AFP news agency quotes him as saying the president's speech comes nearly 10 weeks after he first asked to address the continental body. A second request was also rebuffed. On Monday, Zelensky also said the global grain crisis would last as long as Russia's colonial war. AFP reports sharing the news of the address. The chairperson of the African Union Commission, Musa Faki Mahama, tweeted that the African Union has reiterated the urgent need for dialogue to end the conflict. Much of the world has supported Ukraine in the face of the Russian advance, but diplomatically, Africa has been divided. In March, 17 African countries abstained in a UN vote to condemn the invasion and calling for the immediate withdrawal of its forces. Eritrea was one of the only 5 countries in the world which voted against Russia sanctions. The continent is also feeling the effects of rising wheat prices, which has been partly caused by the conflict. On a recent visit to Russia, Senegal's President Macky Sall said African countries were innocent victims of the war. He appealed to Ukraine and Russia to help ease their suffering. Okay, I have a lot to say about that, but let's just finish the rest of the news items and we head over to Tunisia. Tunisian's President Kais Saied received on Monday the first draft of the new constitution. Under his own timeline, Saied has until June 30th to approve or edit the draft constitution. How do you approve or edit a draft constitution of a country? The constitution of a country. All right, now less than a month ahead of the referendum planned for July 25th. The planned referendum marks 1 year since the power grab by Kais Saied that saw him sack the government and suspend an elected parliament. The The president wants to replace the current constitution, the product of a hard-won 2014 compromise between bitter political rivals, but which enshrined a mixed parliamentary presidential system that often produced political deadlock. The revised constitution is at the center of Said's program for rebuilding Tunisia's political system more than a decade after the revolution that sparked the Arab Spring uprisings. Okay. And then we head over to some other news related to China. And China offered on Monday its mediation for the settlement of disputes in the Horn of Africa at the opening of a conference with the countries of this region plagued by conflicts where it has many interests, noted a journalist from AFP. The first conference China Horn of Africa on security, governance and development brings together until Tuesday in Addis Ababa, China, represented by its special envoy for the Horn of Africa, Zhu Bing, Ethiopia, Djibouti, Kenya, Somalia, Sudan, South Sudan and Uganda, represented by a minister or an ambassador. Eritrea, invited, was not present. He called for avoiding interference in the internal affairs of other countries and rejecting the abuse of unilateral sanctions. The United States withdrew Ethiopia in November from a major trade agreement there, AGOA, because of the human rights abuses in the conflict between the government and rebels in the Tigray region since November 2020, and imposed sanctions on Eritrea in 2021 because of its involvement in the conflict. During a visit to Asmara in January, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi expressed China's opposition to U.S. sanctions against Eritrea, a closed country living under authoritarian regime. I'm not surprised. And then we had so much this afternoon, so let's just bear with me. We go to Mali, where tensions between Russia and the West are aggravating talks about the future of one of the United Nations' biggest and most perilous peacekeeping operations, the force sent to help Mali resist a decade-long Islamic extremist insurgency. The UN's mission in the West African nation is up for renewal this month at a volatile time when extremist attacks are intensifying. 3 UN peacekeepers have been killed this month alone, and Mali's economy is choking on sanctions imposed by neighboring countries after its military rulers postponed a promised election. France and the European Union are ending their own military operations in Mali amid soaring relations with the governing junta. UN Security Council members widely agreed that the peacekeeping mission known as MINUSMA needs to continue, but a council debate this week was laced with friction over France's future role in Mali and the presence of Russian military contractors. The peacekeeping mission began in 2013 after France led a military intervention to oust extremist rebels who had taken over the city's major town in northern Mali that year before. MINUSMA now counts roughly 12,000 troops plus 2,000 police and other officers. More than 270 peacekeepers have since died. France is leading negotiations on extending the mission's mandate and is proposing to continue providing French aerial support. The UN's top official for Mali, El Gassim Mouane, said the force particularly needs the capabilities of the attack helicopters, but Mali strongly objects to a continued French air presence. The recent UN report on Mali remarked on a significant surge in reports of abuses committed by extremists and Malian forces, sometimes accompanied by foreign security personnel. And of course, he did not name names, but British Deputy UN Ambassador James Kariuki said that should be Kenya. James Kariuki said council members are under no illusions this is the Russian-backed Wagner group. And then we end our bulletin this afternoon from South Sudan, where the World Bank has observed that the government's capacity to generate data is weak and unreliable for credible monitoring of the country's economy. The statement is part of the Economic Memorandum for Recovery and Resilience in South Sudan it published last week. According to the World Financial Institution, years of instability have affected the ability of the country to develop reliable systems. It cited what the Central Statistical Organization's capacity to produce statistics has been severely eroded due to conflict-driven damage to infrastructure and office equipment, disruption of staff salary payments, and cessation of donor projects and training opportunities. And the reason is the deteriorating security conditions and geographical divisions that have also crippled the CSO's ability to collect statistical information to cover all activities in all parts of the country. As a result, the World Bank said since 2015, only limited official statistics, including national accounts, price indices, and poverty data, have been compiled, something it says is hampering effective monitoring and analysis of the country's socio-economic conditions. Meanwhile, the World Bank observe that the National Bureau of Statistics produces monthly consumer price index data that are delivered with significant delays and are poor of quality. So that is the latest news from across the continent this afternoon. Thank you so much, Emmanuel Malua. Thank you, Charles Munga. And the rest of you, I really do appreciate your company this afternoon. So anyway, we have so much to talk about. First of all, I'm not really surprised by this finding by World Bank about South Sudan and the kind of data that is generated from government, institutions. They're saying these institutions are quite weak. So even the data that is being generated cannot be used in terms of even making proper projections or just knowing where South Sudan is as a country because of a lot of factors that I guess we are all familiar with. But they're not structures in place. They're not structures in place, and whatever is there is not enough. And so we really can't tell where the country is as far as the monitoring and analysis of the country's socio-economic conditions are, because where the data where this is generated and the people who are supposed to do this and the institutions that are supposed to do this is not there. Of course, it has been disrupted, and they've mentioned some of the reasons they've given. Of course, the conflict that is ongoing and the lack of infrastructure, and sometimes this infrastructure is damaged, and office equipment is also damaged. We've seen a lot of fires happen. People who don't want to be held accountable, and maybe there's an audit ongoing, so they decide, you know what, I'll not just go down by myself. How about I just bring down all of us? I'll just set this place on fire and there will be no records at all. That is what has happened, not just in South Sudan, but I've also seen a few times here in the country. But so that is what is happening. And also when the salary of the staff is delayed, and we know South Sudan has had a problem with paying its civil servants, so they're saying, they don't really care about collecting that very important data. So those are just some of the few examples of the things that are hampering. And so whatever we get from South Sudan as far as the social economic data is concerned, for us to know where to place that country, it's very unreliable, and especially the government institutions that are responsible with such important task. These institutions, their data is unreliable, and so it's very difficult to know what to do with that and how to address some of these issues. And of course, some of those institutions are underfunded. Now, there's some stories I was reading here, and I just let me first leave that issue of Mali, which now we can see it's a full-blown misunderstanding at the United Nations Security, UNSC, United Nations Security Council, and that disagreement between Russia and Europe, we are going to see that proxy war at play in Mali, and we are seeing a snippet of it, but we're not sure if it continues what that will mean in countries where these opposing forces find themselves. Russia has a good presence in Central African Republic. Now it has a good presence in Mali and others. And these are countries that initially the European Union, of course led by France, were leading in terms of offering support, fighting insurgency and insecurity and things like that. So with Russia's presence there, this has changed a few, and we've seen now this war taken to the United Nations Security Council, and some of these permanent members, Russia being one of them, France. And so I don't know, but this proxy war that is playing out over there will be detrimental for the country of Mali, as we have seen since even the military junta took over power. Things have gotten worse. So you don't know if these new insecurities are being planted by this disgruntled. That is, I'm probably thinking loud, but that is just my thinking. How is it that after the Russian mercenary group has arrived in Mali and they're supposed to be helping with fixing the security, then all of a sudden there is an increase in, of course that was there, but there's what is seen to be an increase in insurgency activities in a certain part of the country that was occupied by France and some other, troops. And of course, they're leaving because of the presence of Russians in that country. And all of a sudden, these activities have intensified. Who is funding that? Who is funding that? Who wants to disapprove the presence of Russia there? Who wants to undermine that? So it's a lot that is happening, and we have to be very careful here in Africa. And the reason why, let me just bring us the story of Zelensky. Of course, he was speaking to the African Union. And as much as I do understand the position that Ukraine finds itself as far as this invasion is concerned by Russia, but I don't like that we're being drawn into this. I don't like that we're being forced to take sides in this war. What is happening is wrong, and we've seen the impact being felt even down here. We are feeling the impact of that unnecessary war that is ongoing up, there in Europe. But what really struck me is that President Zelensky, of course, he has been asking to be given audience with the African Union, and so he was allowed some audience with the African Union, which I really don't have a problem with. But I do have a problem, okay? Especially when the African Union chairperson, Moussa Faki, tweeting, of course, that the African Union has reiterated the urgent need for dialogue to end the conflict. And that is well and good. But to call an urgent meeting for Zelensky to address the African Union, but Moussa Faki, the chairperson of African Union, cannot call an urgent meeting to address the issue of Democratic Republic of Congo. Have you seen the intensity of that conflict and what that means to this region and to the continent? Have you seen the renewed attacks? Have you seen what is happening in Libya? I don't know the last time the African Union called for an urgent meeting to discuss Libya. Have you seen what is happening in South Sudan? Have you seen what is happening in Ethiopia? I don't know when the last time the African Union called for an urgent meeting and said, hey, we have a problem in this continent. I'd like for us to convene an urgent meeting because we need to discuss this because this is urgent. The problems that the African Union is supposed to be looking at, the issues that the African Union is supposed to be advancing on behalf of this continent, the African Union has failed miserably. The problems of this continent is not even part of its priority. So you wonder, you're going to convene a meeting for African Union so that President of Ukraine, Zelensky, can address us and tell us how this war is affecting us. And like I said, I do understand his position, and I'm not minimizing what is happening in Ukraine. It is wrong. But you see where our African Union has, as far as its priority is concerned, that confuses me as an African, that upsets me, that makes me feel like we need to convene another urgent meeting and perhaps relook at the mandate of the African Union, because I'm not seeing Moussa Faki talk about the issues that are urgent in this continent with a lot of zeal and a lot of passion, like I've been seeing him express over what is happening in Ukraine. So as much as I understand, but I think this is misplaced. I don't know if African Union was the right platform. And to know that we have so much that is happening, that African Union is supposed to be stepping up and has done nothing about it. African Union has not even tried to intervene in this ongoing conflict in Congo, where we are losing people, where we are having refugees move, where we are having a community now being targeted. African Union has been silent. We're having other countries accused. It has not even bothered to try to mediate. I know our President Uhuru Kenyatta of Kenya has really been trying to mediate this matter through the East African bloc, because he is the current chair of the East African bloc. But what is happening now in the Democratic Republic of Congo has escalated, and where perhaps the East African Community bloc might not be sufficient in really addressing the issues that are coming out of the Democratic Republic of Congo. So it will be nice to know that the conflict in the Democratic Republic of Congo is something that the African Union considers as an urgent matter that requires to be discussed and to be convened, a very urgent meeting to be looked at the African Union. But that is not the case. But you're going to convene a meeting of African countries to discuss Ukraine. What is wrong with us? What is the problem with this African Union? And as much as I do understand Africa, we are not an island. Whatever is happening there is affecting us. I mean, for those who consume wheat, I don't like even wheat itself. So maybe my life has not been very affected. But I do understand that there are a lot of people who consume wheat, consume products from wheat and all that. And so it has affected, you know, the prices. The oil prices have gone up because of this war. So we're all getting affected. But for him now to make it look like this war, this continent is being held hostage by Russia's war, like we are the most affected by what is. Come on, President Zelensky. As much as you're seeking for sympathy, I understand, but this is not a completely African, you know, problem. We have been affected, yes, and so is everybody else in the world. So for you to say that the continent is being held hostage because of the Russia's war in Ukraine, I think that is misplaced. You know, and on Monday, of course, Zelensky also said the global grain crisis would last as long as the Russia's colonial war. We're all in agreement that that war is unnecessary and that war should end. But don't try to push it down our throats and make it look like this is a thing that should keep us awake at night in this continent. You all are going to sort out that issue. You know, NATO should come in and help. Of course it can, because you're not a member of that. But I think this is not fair. This is not fair, and I don't like that African continent is being used as a pawn in this mess. It has nothing to do with us. Leave us alone. As we can try to mediate, as our President Macky Sall did, as the current chairperson of you know, the African Union. He tried, the president of Senegal. He offered to mediate. I think he traveled to Russia, and he also went and met President Zelensky. That's all. So by him, you know, gathering the heads of state and all the African Union to talk about this, I think, I don't know if that was necessary on the part of Musa Faki. And also, why are we not focusing? Like, people are being kidnapped in Nigeria, Musa. People are being, have you seen the insecurity of Nigeria? People are being kidnapped for ransom. That has become a plague over there. All right, these are some of the things that we should be talking about as African Union, and say, hey, there's a country here where things are not going right. Does it need our help? How can we intervene? Does it have enough resources? Or what can we do as the African Union? I've not heard Musa Faki bring up these issues. So for him to convene this meeting on behalf of, for the African Union, behalf of you know, President Zelensky to come and speak to the African Union, to the continent, I have a beef with that. Not that because what is happening in Ukraine is not important, it is, but we have very urgent things that needs the attention of the African Union in this continent, and I wish this union would do what it's supposed to be doing and what we expect of it, and so that it can respond to some of these things that we need for it to respond to, okay? All right, so it's interesting that China now is offering itself to mediate between the disputes in the Horn of Africa. We know what is happening in Ethiopia, we know what is happening in Somalia, we know around that area, Eritrea, we know what's going on there, and China is offering to mediate. I guess it wants to mediate between, especially the problem in Ethiopia. I don't know how China will be an effective mediator when it seems as though it has already taken sides. Remember, the U.S. withdrew Ethiopia in November from a major trade agreement, the AGOA, and because of human rights abuses of what has been happening between the government of Ethiopia and the Tigrayan people, TPLF, in conflict between the government and the rebels, as I said, since November 2020, and because of the U.S. imposed sanctions on Eritrea. And the U.S. did not go full throttle as it would if, say, that country was Zimbabwe or some other country. That is because Ethiopia is a very important partner in the Horn of Africa as far as the U.S. is concerned. So that's why people have been feeling as though the U.S. is just handling the issue in Ethiopia with kids' gloves, because it has a lot of interest in Ethiopia. And so China now is saying that these sanctions, of course, it is saying the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi expressed China's opposition to U.S. sanctions against Eritrea, a closed country, because Eritrea was also sanctioned because, of course, there were credible reports that it was supporting the killings of the people in Tigray. You know, it's a whole history. I will not even start giving the background right now, but it's a whole history. And if you've been following this conflict, you know that there are credible reports that indeed Eritrea was involved in that conflict. And so after several warnings, it was sanctioned. So China now is saying, you know, I'm willing to come in and mediate over this matter. And on top of that, I think the sanctions are wrong and it does not agree. So if you're going to mediate, but you're also taking side, if you're going to mediate, you see, like President Uhuru Kenyatta now is trying to mediate over what is happening in Rwanda, in Democratic Republic of Congo. It's because Kenya has no stakes there. I want to believe that. You know, if you want to mediate, then you have to be on a neutral ground. So you can't offer to mediate and still you're taking sides. It does not work like that, China. It's either you're going to mediate and you come there with clean hands, with no interest at all, or you just don't offer to mediate at all. And because we know China has a lot of interest, of course, in Africa right now, and for it to speak like this, that means a lot of its interest is being threatened. And so that's why it's offering. So the first conference, China, Horn of Africa on security, governance and development. China is having a conference on governance. Okay, that's a first. So China is having a conference on security, governance and development. I can agree on the development part because you've seen, as I said, it has a lot of interest in this continent. And so this minister said he called for avoiding interference in the internal affairs of other countries and rejecting the abuse of unilateral sanctions. Well, that is how the West works. You know, sanctions has been weaponized. If you're not singing to their tunes or dancing to their music or doing whatever they feel does not meet the standards in their books, they sanction you. And so that is what we've seen. But you can't compare the sanctions that have been meted on Ethiopia with other sanctions that have been meted in other countries. So it still does not compare. But China, I don't think, is the right person to mediate on the Horn of Africa conflict. It cannot mediate properly over there. So I think, of course, the this Nigerian ransom stories, I think it's a broken record now. Unfortunately, these are not just statistics. These are people's lives in danger. And the fact that these criminals, they did kidnap about 36 people over the weekend. So one, I don't know, was able to pay for the ransom and he was let go. And the rest, the church members are saying, we can't afford to pay for the ransom. And what I'm wondering is, because he was left, they released him so that he goes and asks the relatives of these victims to pay up. That means he can lead the authorities to where these criminals are. I'm beginning to think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, this ransom business in Nigeria is not just a criminal enterprise. There are possibilities of security apparatus being involved, because how do you not catch any of these people? How do they release somebody, the money is sent, and nobody cares to follow where this money is going, and they get the money and they organize another kidnapping and they organize another attack, and it continues, and it's now a booming business. Tell me how this has been able to thrive if the security apparatus in Nigeria are not involved. At this point, it's either we have a few bad elements in the security forces in Nigeria, or there is a huge lap as far as security, intelligence, and operators is concerned in Nigeria. Because there's no way this have continued. And we don't even hear of arrest of these kidnappers. We don't even hear arrest of these bandits. Now it's not even the bandits, now it's the kidnappers, because they're running into churches, they're abducting people, they're abducting people in their homes, they're abducting children in schools. And it has become something that has been normalized. And the security forces never bother. This money, when it's being delivered, there is a channel. Why have you never bothered to follow that and see that you apprehend these people who have continued to terrorize the lives of very innocent people? So these people who were abducted on Sunday, they're saying, hey, we have no money to pay these kidnappers. So what we'll do, what will happen to these people? They might be killed by these jokers. And the government is a bigger joker because it never bothers to see that it addresses this issue. So, like I said, it's a broken record now, and that is unfortunate. I want to thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Thank you for your company. Joseph Otto Manasseh, you're saying, let Zelensky forget nobody in Africa should mess us with the Ukraine war. Look at even NATO countries are breaking the sanctions against Russia. Oil and gas are still coming from Russia, and yet they have imposed sanctions on Russia. Europe has started to feel the sanctions themselves. German, among others, let them not confuse us. Okay, thank you. And the rest of you, thank you so much for your time. I'll see you here tomorrow, God willing. Bye-bye.